Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids and welcome to some 3v3 tag arena action, where today I am joined by free-to-play arena mastermind, Erbad. How are you doing, man?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on yet again.
Yeah, I have you recovered mentally and I don't know, in your talking wise from our short 10-minute news summary that escalated into 45-minute podcast type video about all the news this week.
Yeah, I mean, I had to get a cup of tea, a biscuit, and a lie down, but now I'm
Yeah.
I'm back, recovered, and I can go once more to delve deeply into the bowels of Raid Shadow Legends.
Excellent. All right. So what we're going to do, you can see I've already knocked out the easy fights for some points. I've got a lot of fights ahead of me, not to get knocked down today. I was slacking this week away on holiday. But what I asked Eherbad to do, I sent Eherbad a picture of my entire champion roster. And much like we did in our previous collab, which you should definitely go check out if you want, where we basically took some samples of free-to-play or very low-spend players in the community that submitted their rosters, and we took a look at them together and sort of built up some teams. So I did today, we put Erbad on the spot, gave him a very challenging job, which was showing him my roster and saying, what would you do with this roster? And then we can compare his ideas with my ideas, see what actually works, actually go and fight some fights. And yeah, we're also going to talk about then how you would need to build these champions to actually get them to work. And yeah, walk you through some sample fights too. So it should hopefully be a pretty good dive into that really, really late game 3v3 arena sort of constructing and fighting and battling, and especially kind of coming up with really effective, hopefully very effective compositions, even without some of those crucial champions. Like I don't have like a Duchess or like Sifi that are really the cornerstones of a lot of people. No Necret, for example. It's like, what do you do without that? Can you still build good teams? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. So, let me see
Yeah, it's
here.
always an interesting challenge, particularly when the roster is quite large. Like you've been playing for quite a long time, but
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have all the meta champions. So there's a lot of champions to kind of look through and decide which ones to focus on. And that's
Yeah.
where that whole roster analysis that we went through in the last video and that I explained in a standalone video previously, which actually was the reason we then ended up doing that last collaboration, was you'd seen that video. And I really think it helps to kind of narrow the focus and say, well, okay, my roster's like 100 six-star champions, but I can't even begin to think which ones to use if I'm looking at 100. So just
Yes.
sort of trim it down, figure out which ones are the most viable nukers, cleansers, strippers, control, support, and protection champions, and then start to try and build teams around those. And obviously, it helps also identify where your weaknesses are. And I think we established very quickly what was missing. I just realized just now that since we added Elva, because you did the pull
Yes.
for Elva, she should also be in the cleanser.
Yeah. Which is a big deal for me.
Cleanser category, which was where you were definitely a little bit light on.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this was Eherbad threw together this graphic here. Like you said, breaking down the champions and your roster into specific things. I've actually, by the way, I've seen quite a lot of people on my Discord like sharing their rosters and talking about how helpful it has been for them to look at it and to understand. But you've got like the kind of key roles for Arena. Nuker, straightforward, does big damage. Cleanser, about removing debuffs from your team. Stripper, removing buffs from the enemy team. Control, locking out the enemy with either like stuns or whatever, sleeps, or putting their abilities on cooldown. Support, which is probably the most open-ended one. We've got things in here like revivers, particularly champions giving us good buffs and healing. And then protection, which are champions that can keep your team alive even when you're taking really big hits. So this is how you broke it down. What did you think then? So you mentioned the cleansing was Elva has a nice addition there, but cleansing was pretty rough. We got lots of nukers, but yeah, what did you think of the pool of champions you had to work with? Were you like, this is easy, this is difficult? What were your initial
No,
thoughts?
I would say it was tricky. On the one hand, you had almost too many nuker options with not enough kind of meta support, and that was kind of the balance that was tricky.
Yeah.
Was trying to figure out, well, I've got so many nuker options. which ones are actually going to have good synergy with the supports that I can use or would like to use, particularly in both an offense and defense scenario, which I think you end up with quite different teams between the two, but you don't want to spread your resources too thin either. So you do want to be able to try and reuse at least, half to three quarters of the champions that you're going to be relying on in offense in your defense team as well, because you're just not going to have gear enough to build 20, 30 champions to that level. Like, your best gear is always going to be limited. And as you get more better gear, your best gear is still limited. It's just higher up. And so you're always chasing to the top. So you don't want to build sort of, 30 champions averagely. Is better off if you can build 10 really, really, really strong ones and then have a few supporting cast members.
Yeah, you'll see it's probably definitely, when we look at some of the gearing, I definitely think with some of these champions, it's kind of like, I feel like it can be difficult, and it's why it can be really helpful to get an outside perspective as well on your teams, is that you can be trying so many different things and not really settling in on like one synergized team and then perfecting your build for that. So for champions that could have multiple different builds, like let's say Torment or Hegemon, that we've got both in Control and in Nuker, right? Very different types of builds that you'd use for them. So until like you settle into like, okay, am I building this Hegemon as a CC Hegemon, or am I building him as a Nuker Hegemon? Like if you're sort of flip-flopping between the two, that could be a point where you start to kind of do both jobs badly. I think my Torment is built a bit like that. He does both jobs fairly badly. He's kind of built to do both. But yeah, let's shall we dive into some of the team ideas that you came up with then with this? I'm curious as well, any viewers who want to play along, you can pause, look at the roster, and see what you would actually do. I'm curious what people would come up with. So let's take a look. So I think we're jumping into, do you want to start with the offense or the defense stuff?
I'd say start with the defense, because I think that's the thing that, because offense tends to be a bit more dynamic and you'll adjust based on the teams that you're facing, and you always have some flex spots or flex kind of within the overall composition. But your defense, you're pretty much going to a degree, set and forget. You want it to be as reliable as possible, and you're probably not going to be changing it every half hour. Indeed. Probably not even at all each week, but you might look at it at the end of a reset period and see how much you got attacked and which ones lost more than the others, and maybe make a fine-tuning that way. Absolutely. So in this regards, I'd say when I'm trying to come up with a defense team, I'm looking to make things as awkward as possible for anyone who is going to attack them. Mm-hmm. So I want to have some kind of ability to take a hit. So we ideally want to have the ability to go second if they do win the speed race, or at least a way of disrupting them. Yeah. And we also want something that they're going to need to have to control in our team. If they want to attack us, they need to be able to control an element of our team to have a chance of a success. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at Team 1, if you're not controlling Ramantu, you're going to have a problem. Yep. If you're not controlling Candy in Team 2, you'll probably have a problem. And if you're not controlling Mortu, you're going to have a problem. So that's kind of the idea there, and that they have clear win conditions, and they have some mechanic, either kind of a disruption or control in itself that the attacker needs to consider. And then we're trying to add in some form of protection and support to kind of outlast the opposition and to further frustrate. So in that regards, we've got Krisk and Ultimate Death Knight adding this kind of protection. We've also got kind of Mithrala and Uko can be very, very annoying to fight. Very. on defense. Particularly Uko, I've been finding her a real pain actually on offense. Yeah. The best solution I've had so far is simply to use my basher on her, because even then it's annoying though, because of the A1 decrease attacks. I have to make sure I've got block debuffs out. Yeah, Uko is fantastic, actually. I'd actually rebuilt Uko maybe a couple of weeks before we did this to actually bring Uko into my teams for Arena. Well, I was using Uko a bit in Hydra, and I said, you know what? I don't need Uko for Hydra. I've got other options there, but Uko is so good for Arena.
I was like, I'm just going to focus solely on that. So I re-geared Uko there to focus purely on arena. And yeah, Uko's great. Really good champ.
So yeah, if we go through the three teams, my
Mm,
thought process on team one was we'd have Arbiter to kind of ensure that the opposition would probably want to try and go speed. That would be their natural thing, would be think to beat us in speed.
yeah.
But we have the Tormin, so that will probably, even if they, naturally have faster champions than us, they might not be able to use their speed team because of the Tormin, and they want to bring
Mm,
block debuffs instead. Well, if they're bringing a load of block debuffs and a slower team to say using a Siphi or a Duchess to bring in that block debuffs to go up against our team, well then they have to contend with Ramantu as well, who's going to then strip them. So they need to kind of have some way of winning the speed race before Ramantu goes, and then using either a Yumiko or a Warlord to stop Ramantu. But then all the while, they've also got to contend with Hegemon, who's going first anyway. So it becomes actually a bit of a puzzle on how you even beat Team One in a reliable way. And I think if you can create teams where people look at them and within 10 seconds they're like, I'm not sure what I'd run, they'll probably just skip you and go on to someone else.
yeah, true.
And that's the biggest part in tag team defense, is just to not be attacked at all.
Yes.
The reality is there's no defense that can win 100%.
Yeah. That's it. There's always going to be some dude who comes in, you were mentioning before we started recording, he's going to come in with a bunch of +4 champions and is going to wipe the floor with you. And there's nothing you can do against that, right? Unless you two are willing to spend, tens and thousands of dollars to do the same thing. You just kind of have to accept that you're not going to win everything. And every defense is going to have some flaw, some selection of champions that you can beat it. One interesting idea, actually, I wanted to put past you, because I've actually done very similar stuff myself with defense, where I have one faster team with Arbiter and then two sort of go second type teams. Well, one interesting idea I'd heard before was that it could be really valuable to have three teams of the same type. So either three go first teams or like three go second teams, with the idea being that for a lot of players, you might have like the tools to beat one go first team or two go first teams, but when it comes to a third one, that's where you start going like, oh, and you start to worry and go, oh, I'm not sure which of those is actually fastest and what do I do? Or same thing with three go second teams. You're like, okay, I've got the tools to actually, take out a go second team, but maybe I can only beat two of them. The third one, I come to it and I go like, oh, okay, well, I've used Ramantu, or I've used whatever, I've used another stripper. I've got nothing left for this third team. And you go, oh, well, I don't want to really risk it if I lose one of those first two fights, and I can't really fight that third one. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know. What do you sort of think about that? Is that something that you'd ever consider building teams? Like maybe it wasn't an option here. Have you seen
It's certainly an option. I think if you had two Duchess and a Siphi,
yeah, that'd be nice.
we're probably going for three go second teams. But so it's kind of like, well, everyone ends up with an Arbiter, and she is a very good support champion overall. So unless you have three other better supports, you're probably going to use her in a team.
Yeah.
And the reason we've gone there with the Tormin, Hegemon, Ramantu, that kind of combination, is it's not a traditional speed team.
It's not,
such.
yeah.
So it's not as easy to counter. I think a pure standard cookie cutter speed team is actually quite easy to counter.
Yeah.
So it's not really a speed team. It's a bit of a kind of combo hybrid of go second / go first. It's just trying to be a nuisance.
Yeah.
And I think that's more what defense is about. If you can be annoying, and Uko is just a perfect example of an annoying champion, because
more too as well.
Exactly, like they're just so irritating to fight against. So like I do agree to a certain degree that having three of one type, maybe some people don't have the tools to beat all three. But I would say whenever I see three teams where none of them are a speed team, I know that I can put my Arbiter, Ramantu, Basher, Lioris team and win. There's like almost no way that I won't find one of their three teams that team will just beat it.
Fair. That's fair.
And therefore it kind of makes it a bit easier for me to then decide how I jostle the other two fights because I've almost got a free win.
Right.
And
That
that's what I try and avoid most of all is giving any team where it looks like it's an easy win. Because as soon as someone says, "Well, I've got one easy win, I only need to win one of the other two," you become more of an attractive target.
So let's take a quick look then at this particular team. Because I was curious, two of the champions that we mentioned are coming through here in terms of having a bit of a different build. So to touch briefly on we can dive more into builds a bit later, I guess, in more detail. But talking briefly about this particular team, how do you foresee these being built? Is it like, which one is a nuker, or do we have all control? Are any of these champs in stone skin? Like, what is the thinking here? What are the keys to making this particular team work well?
So when I was looking through your roster, I thought it would make most sense for Tormin to be built as a control champion and Hegemon probably as a full-on nuker.
Interesting. So
Because you don't really have anyone that's going to a natural support to increase defense for Tormin.
true.
And you do have the Mithrala, but I thought because you have two Mortus, that you don't really need to go for a defensive nuker on defense. So, and if you did want a defensive nuker, you've now also got Stoutus.
Yeah.
Another guaranteed recently. So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think you would need Tormin to be a nuker on your account. But obviously you do kind of want a win condition on that team, so it probably makes sense that the Hegemon ends up being a nuke Hegemon. Plus, I think people might not be able to necessarily predict whether it's
Yeah.
going to be a nuke or control Hegemon. It could end up,
That's very interesting.
surprising them a bit.
Yeah. I suppose, would you have Hegemon like open with the A1, or do you have him open with the AoE nuke then?
I think open with the nuke, and then
Okay.
obviously Ramantu goes in and strips, and Tormin goes and CCs, and it could be a real pain.
Yeah.
For people, particularly if Hegemon's taken out one of the champions that they needed on that first turn to kind of put up to cleanse or to put up the block debuffs. If they've come in thinking that you've got just a load of CC and that you've not actually got a nuker, they might not run a protection champion. They might just be running like a cleanser support strip and nuke, or cleanse support control and nuke. And you could end up killing one of those other champions if they don't have a protection champion.
Yeah.
Your nuke Hegemon probably will kill someone.
Yeah. I feel like Tormund definitely is one of those champs that comes through, and when you add in a stripper, someone that can rip off the block debuffs or stone skin or whatever, that makes him so much more of a threat. Whereas if he's just trying to do the thing on his own, it's so easy to counter him on his own with just like a cleanser that's in stone skin or immunity or something. And it's like, well, easy done. But when you add in that threat of the stripper, and also on top of that, like a Hegemon coming in who can lock out as well. Yeah, I think I like that. That's what I liked about this team. I actually don't have them built quite as you said. In terms of how would you be building the Arbiter and Ramantu? So you can see I actually just built a CC Hegemon from when I first got him. I actually pulled this guy really recently and I wasn't sure what to do. I put him in CC with very random CC. Like, he's got a bunch of crit rate, which is really not good, but I didn't have another piece of stun set free that had accuracy on it. So I was like, you know what? It will work. And it works mostly, but for defense, it's a bit dodgy. Do you want to talk about...
Ideally, I'd probably be going Ramantu 4-piece stone skin, 2-piece perception. That would be my thinking there. With Tormin, probably in a provoke set.
He's got Swift Barry.
Would be the optimum. Just because you have that higher chance of CCing over the sunset.
Yeah.
And then Arbiter, I mean, you could either go full speed, or you could, if you wanted to, go into immunity, because you don't actually.
That's true.
It's not really a speed team, and someone might come in and go, well, okay, I'll bring my own Torment or something against it, and then if they realise that actually you've got Ramantu and Stone Skin and Arbiter and immunity, and it doesn't necessarily work out as well.
Yeah.
It is tricky. There's never really one solution. There's so many ways to gear each champions, and
That's
it's
true.
kind of you need to, with any of these teams, you kind of pick the teams, you pick your initial kind of configuration, your initial gearing, and then you just have to test them out. You have to see how they interact and what the weakness is.
Yeah, yeah,
And then that
100%.
might influence a bit of regearing in the future. But that would probably be where I'd be thinking of starting.
Yeah, yeah. I do like it. It's very interesting. And that's where, like, because I got Hegemon so recently, it was like I wasn't 100% sure like where to fit him in exactly. So it's really good to get like that outside perspective of seeing like, okay, well, you've got these champions for ages and then mixing them together with that new champion and rethinking the team. That's difficult to do. Like Tormund is straight up a disaster. I think Tormund was in Provoke and then I ripped it off him because I wanted the Provoke set for Hydra, and I ended up in a Swift Parry thing, which is really not very good. But I do use him then. You can see I actually got him at 350 accuracy for Doom Tower Hard, where I do use him.
Yeah.
And he comes into some arena teams, but he's in that weird spot where you can see when you look at his stats. This is what I mean about, I mentioned earlier, where I'm a bit 50-50 sometimes. He's got lots of defense, crit rate, but really bad crit damage. And then he's got really average accuracy. So it's like he does okay damage and he does okay CC, but he doesn't have enough accuracy to be a really good control champion, and he doesn't have enough damage to be a really good nuker. He's like, I'm average at both of those things, but not great at either one. So that's where I should sit down really and fit him to a proper role. He's good for Doom Tower Hard. You'll see on offense, I use him in one offense team that ends up working well, but his build is a little bit of a disaster.
Certainly, and I think that's actually probably where most players end up struggling in arena most, is that they haven't really focused those builds enough.
Yes.
And it's just a perfect example for me is, I have Magnar, who is a very good HP nuker.
Oh yeah.
But the build on Magnar just isn't quite good enough on my account. So to the point that I will run Candrathon against Duchess teams ahead of bringing in Magnar.
Ah, interesting.
Just because his build's just not good enough. He just doesn't do enough damage for me to be able to kill enough people in Gold 4.
Gotcha.
I could rebuild him and give him better gear, but he's just kind of got good enough gear to be able to do,
same.
secret rooms, faction wars, all this kind of stuff. Actually, a very similar build to what you've got there. It's about 80k HP, about 250 crit damage. And it's like, it's fine for
it's okay, but
nearly everything, but it's just not good enough for that real end game arena.
Yeah.
And, it's almost better to invest all of your best gear into a handful of champions and even run them, the wrong affinity, and you end up with a better success rate. It's that people try and use the optimum champions in inverted commas, but in suboptimal builds, which are actually less effective than suboptimal champions in optimum builds.
Yes. Okay, let's touch on. I know we're going a lot in detail into this first team. I think it's a really interesting team. I want to touch on Ramantu briefly. Basically, the way I've built mine up, I've got him very quick, so he's sort of speed tuned up with the Arbiter. He's got no crit rate, and he's just got high accuracy. And I just use him as that like really, really fast and sort of speed team offense, just going in and stripping them off. I also use him for Doom Tower as well, where the build also works pretty well. But I was kind of curious, you're saying like putting him in Stone Skin, like how do you build your Ramantu? How would you build him like in this team in terms of like accuracy, speed, sort of thresholds to fit in here? Like what would you say are we're going into, let's say gold, let's just broadly say gold in Tag Arena. How would you be looking to build him?
I had my Ramantu built pretty much identically to yours. High speed, high accuracy, 6-piece perception.
Yeah.
And I had that for a long time. And I used him in a very similar way to you, in a faster team within Arena, and also for those Doom Tower floors where you want the block passive skill.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've only moved him in to 4-piece Stone Skin about 2 weeks ago now. And I have to say, like, it's much better in Arena.
Yeah.
It just really is. Like,
yeah.
Just having that kind of that immunity, particularly because Ramantu has this annoying passive
with break speed tunes. Yes, yeah.
But it also gives him that buff. So even if you're going against a Torment team, for instance,
he just refreezes.
and you have a cleanser,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work out, shall we say.
Yeah. 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 I actually have
But
that
he also,
on one of my offense teams. I was trying to run him with Skytouch Shaman. I just didn't have enough speed gear on Skytouch to have her be able to resist, like untouchable. I just couldn't make her fast enough to actually be able to cleanse Ramantu. So I just roll the dice sometimes, dude. I'm just like, yeah, you know what? We just pray that he doesn't get frozen because it's gonna mess it up entirely. So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Because like, if I do see a Torment team, I'll probably won't bring a cleanser. I'll just bring in Duchess
Oh
as
yeah.
my fastest champion, and then Ramantu
Yeah.
goes and freezes himself, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
can't do the one job you're there for. What is the point of bringing you? So,
True.
platinum players would probably say you build stone skin and you go super slow, just a little bit faster than your
Yeah.
nuka.
Yeah.
But I want these builds to be usable everywhere. And I do want to be able to use him in that Doom Tower role that you mentioned. Like that's a place that I use him as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I looked at my seer speed. How fast is my seer once she's got all of her buffs? Because I've still got Whirlwind on mine. And
Mhm.
I then said, well, I need Ramantu to be faster than that.
Yeah.
And I also, because I use Lydia there, I also want Lydia to be faster, but probably slower than Ramantu.
Okay.
So I then said, basically, I worked out my max speed on Seer and I added 2 for Ramantu. So I
Okay.
think I've got him at like 244. So it's not
Oh yeah.
quite slow enough to be kind of plat level play,
Yeah.
but he's also still usable everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do find that having him that little bit slower kind of does make him more likely to come after their cleanser. Like it kind of works as a balance. It's a bit of a middle ground.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
be changing my builds all the time. I know some people do, but I prefer not to have to change builds for different content all the time. So I'll try and find that balance the way it works quite nicely. So that's
Yeah.
what I ended up doing.
How
And
much
then just max.
accuracy were you able to get?
Let me just double check.
Stone
I
skin.
think it's 600.
Oh, that's pretty solid. Yeah, I was gonna say 600 is like a nice thing to aim for.
644.
Oh my god, you've got almost you're basically as much as me in the triple perception. I need to up my gear game. 644. Wow. So let's say 600 plus. Let's say 600 ish. Let's put in the old
I think all you do
But
is you
240-ish.
target. If you can get 600, you'll be fine for most of the time. And if you
Yeah.
do think that they might have a little bit more resistance, you can always use him as lead. Like he does have a really nice accuracy aura when you are
Yeah,
on
very strong
offense.
aura. Yeah, yeah.
Like 80 accuracy is pretty strong. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're going against Mithralis, you're going to need to bring in increased accuracy anyway. At which point,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
600's probably fine once you've got the increased accuracy on as well.
Very true. Yeah. Okay. I definitely have him on in line for sure for a champion to regear in Stone Skin, and you have you have renewed my enthusiasm to do so for sure. All right. I like that first team definitely. So we can't actually test it properly here because I have the wrong builds on all of these champions effectively, except for Arbiter would be fine. But so we can't properly test it. But very, very cool. Let's look at these other two teams then. We've got a couple of go second ones. So we got Elva, who I haven't got in the mix yet. She is waiting for our nice personal first of two personal reward CVCs to get ascended and have her remaining gear rolled up. I have her ready to go in Stone Skin actually. Her accessories also need to be rolled up. The first time the Sylvan Watcher stuff getting rolled up. But yeah, we've got Elva looking in on this team too. Do you want to walk us through both? Or
Yeah, so I mean, my Elva is also waiting. I think she's a bit further behind yours. Mine is 6-star, but only like level 30, and still needs masteries, all of which will go during the PR CVC. So a similar kind of idea. I'm actually going to build mine probably in Untouchable rather than Stone Skin because I do want her to be quick enough to cleanse. So she'll kind of replace my current with the build, which is 294 speed. I think.
Oh yeah, very quick. Mine's very slow. Yeah.
So I will go down a slightly different path. Stone Skin is kind of, I think, optimum in the long run, but I just don't have enough Stone Skin gear
That's fair.
to be able to build everyone that I want. But I think as long as you have her either in Untouchable or Stone Skin, it's fine. It doesn't really matter too much. I actually it's the only one of the series that I've got out so far, but I did a how to build a arena cleanser video where I talk through
Okay.
exactly kind of the process that I would go through in terms of how to build them.
I
And I
need to
go
go
through
watch that.
I go through the Hell Hades optimizer, and I kind of
Nice.
explain that I do it in like a series of iterations. So
Gotcha.
I'll start for solving for one stat, figure out what my gear is capable of, and then move on to the next stat and the next stat, and then finally solve for effective HP, so for survivability. And it means that you can kind of balance out all of your gear to have
Yeah.
the overall best build, but without just asking it to solve it once.
Yeah.
You can end up getting a better build overall.
Interesting. How
So
much sort of are you going to be looking to build it with resistance then? Has with the Withier?
yeah, that's going to be my intent. So during that actual video, I showed that if I rebuilt my Wither, I could have upped her resistance to about 600
Okay. Yeah.
at
Interesting.
that speed.
Wow. Yeah, that's really fast. All right. That's nasty. Interesting. Yeah. I'm aiming for hopefully maybe about 650. Basically, the way that I tend to look at resistance, it's a really awkward stat to build, isn't it? Because you need so much of it. I'm looking to maybe get about 650. I kind of figure that if the most accuracy I have on my account, I should probably actually run the optimizer. I've never run it and actually really buff up the accuracy. I've got about 650. I think is actually my highest. I could probably get them up to 700. Like again, if I can put out a champion with 700 accuracy, I've got to assume the people I'm fighting are going to be able to as well. In which case, anything 700 or less resistance isn't going to do much. But it's just very, very difficult to actually build resistance that high.
It is, but I also think, particularly now,
Yeah.
with people having or trying to move more champions into Stone Skin, I
Yeah.
actually think the average accuracy level in Arena is probably a bit lower than it was a couple of
That's
months ago.
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
I just look at myself, like my
Yeah.
old Ramantu build was like 750 ac, and
Yeah.
now he's 650. So I've dropped 100,
Dropped
moving
100.
him from Perception to Stone Skin.
There you
The
go.
same with my Madame, who's actually now also in Stone Skin and Perception. She's also lost about 70 to 100 accuracy in doing so.
Oh, my madame is 700. I clearly gave her all the accuracy, but she's got no speed.
Well, exactly. It's like a trade-off
Yeah. Yeah.
at
Yeah.
a certain point. And I think,
Yeah.
well, who might you be resisting if you have 650? Well, it's probably someone that they're trying to build fast and with accuracy.
Yeah.
So maybe Lysandra,
Oh, yeah. That's a good
maybe a
example.
Warlord, maybe a Yumiko. Maybe you'll be resisting them if they've been, or
Very
Kaiba,
true.
if they've been built with like 5 to 600 accuracy and closer to 300 speed, and you're at
Yeah.
650, you've got a good chance of resisting them. You probably won't resist a
Yes.
Madame with increased accuracy, but you never will. So it
Yeah,
almost doesn't
that's
matter.
true. Yeah, that's a really good point, though. Actually, it's really good, especially with Stone Skin being a thing. As you get, I've not really used Basher. We're going to talk about Basher. I don't have Yumiko or Warlord, but that's obviously a big factor when it comes to endgame arena because those champions are so ridiculously powerful and they bypass Stone Skin. But like you said, for them to be quick, you're going to give up accuracy to be quick. So having good resistance even in Stone Skin, if it's enough to give you a fighting chance against that, can make a huge deal when it's a champion you might be relying on. Or I think like Uko, my Uko, for example, is coming in at about 500 accuracy. That's in Stone Skin, trying to be somewhat tanky and fast. Because you're trying to build so many stats on Uko. He's unfortunately somehow ended up with a ton of attack, which I really don't want, but he has anyway.
The damage dealing Uko.
Damage Uko.
It's your win condition. No one saw it coming.
Yeah, but I think it is hard to get Uko really fast with good stats and good accuracy in 6-piece Stone Skin, which gives you no accuracy. So that's a good point actually in that sense that building resistance can still be it's definitely it's hard to be super reliable, but yeah, like I could say for Elva I'm aiming to at least get over 600, and I want her to be fast because I want her to work in Hydra as well. Like for Hydra I want 500 resistance on her, and I want preferably over 250 speed. So I'm not quite sure if my Elva with this gear is going to get there. She's going to get more speed from Ascension. We'll see how the stuff rolls and glyphs and things like that. But I'm not quite sure.
Banner to come and the amulet.
Yeah.
And the amulet, if you got like in the end, a double roll, let's say, would be a realistic thing to get at some point in the next couple of months.
Yep. So she
and
might
a
get there.
6-star banner. That's quite a lot of resistance.
She's
Still
she's
to come.
getting close. She's getting close. So we're gonna be able to fit her in. But yeah, let's talk about the team build. So this was the team that you were looking at here. Uko, we just talked about a bit. Elva as well. Kandrafon, Classic, and Krisk. So yeah, broadly speaking, what's the concept of this team? How does it work? What makes it such a pain to deal with as a defense?
So my overall kind of concept was essentially we've got Uko there for the buff removal and as a reviver.
Yeah.
Before you got Elva, I was going to suggest Brogni as the second one to give
Interesting.
the block debuffs and the increased attack that would help Kandrafon. But I do think Elva just gives that a little bit extra because you've got the full team cleanse as well as the block debuffs and the increased speed. And so you've got two champions that are going to give you increased speed, so you should kind of have that up all the time. And you've got a way of cleansing yourself, stripping them, and then once they're stripped by Uko, you've also got Chris coming in for a provoke to get a bit of control going. Yeah, and it's just about being a pain. Just you're being a nuisance. So you've got Uko, who we've discussed already in this video, that she's just a real pain to go up against. Even I find Uko teams quite aggravating to attack.
He's my new favorite team. It's like my Uko team is similar to this one actually. I've got slightly different, but I'm actually planning to put Elva in the Uko team, and I'll show you the champ we haven't talked about that I randomly put in, and it's been medium successful, but I love my Uko team. Yeah, I think it's a he as well. I think he's got.
I'm not actually sure. Yeah,
I think he's got his nips out.
I can't remember.
Yeah, he's got the nips out with piercings.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with a he then.
We'll go with a he. Probably, yeah. he's got a large dangly pair here as well.
A pair of balls at the front.
I think symbolic.
And a big stick. So we'll assume it's.
Yeah,
it's a he.
Yeah. Very true. But yeah, so cool. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you've tons of kill threat with the Kandrafon. I really like that as well. Yeah, I think this is a nasty team.
And two revivers.
Two revives, yeah.
Can be really annoying to go up against. You've got two revivers, and if Elva does the revive, then gets the increased attack, you've got protection coming in naturally from Krisk. You just got a lot of annoying mechanics, particularly like you said, if you end up with a couple of them built in stone skin, and Kandrafon can veil himself, so it's quite awkward overall.
Indeed, yeah. Elva actually, she also does put out perfect veil. It's only for one turn. You'd be relying on your mastery, right, to proc and extend it for two. I think it would expire, wouldn't it, on the Candy before he takes his turn?
No, I think the way I would understand it would be that actually it's a good question. I would assume that you would lose it at the end of his turn rather than the beginning of his turn.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't tested it yet, but it's one
that would be my assumption. Would be that she would, she is faster, so she will go first.
Yeah.
She'll make sure Kandrafon's under veil if he hasn't already gone under, because they've buffed TM anyway. He could be under a veil anyway.
Definitely.
But it does give another way of getting into the veil, and it's a nice little synergy there between Elva and Candy. It just seemed like the natural protection champion to use in this team would be Chris, because you get that bit of control, and then you've got Uko to clear off the buffs to allow Chris to do the provoke. So it's about trying to find ways of, they look at that and they'll be like, okay, well I'll just bring in block debuffs against the Chris, but then are your block debuffs protected? If they're not, then Uko will clear them off. So it's just layering up annoying mechanics as much as you can on the defense to make it more difficult for people to attack you.
So the interesting thing about this is I don't actually use Krisk in Arena. This is one I don't use that you had in the teams. The reason I don't is because I've got him built up for Hydra, and I feel like the Hydra build is not going to quite work super well in Arena. So I'd be curious what sort of stats you'd be looking for in a Krisk to work in Arena. Like, I feel like my Krisk is just going to die with this because he's actually quite squishy. He's got good speed, the 500 resistance, about 400 accuracy. I feel like the accuracy is too low to work in Arena reliably. It would work against the nukers, I suppose. You could provoke them, especially with a buff strip, like you said. but I'm just worried that he would die. He's triple perception. He's got no reaction. He's got a blood shield for Hydra, and he's got War Master for Hydra as well. He doesn't have defensive masteries. So that's what put me off using the Krisk, was that, which is something that you obviously didn't know when I asked you to do the teams. What do you have I don't know if you actually have a Krisk yourself.
I don't have a Krisk. I mean, the alternative would be Goffred, who you also have. I think he synergizes better if you have a defense-based nuker, but I think he'll work perfectly well in this team anyway. The thing with Krisk is I do still find him sometimes in Arena, and I'm pretty sure these people are using him in Hydra. I'd be surprised if anyone has a Krisk that they're not using in Hydra. So I'd expect they're probably...
There's probably here's one right there. Build.
And
there's another.
It's one of those things you kind of have to try it and see how it works.
Yes.
I would probably say a little bit higher HP would be preferable, but I don't think you need to worry too much about having super high accuracy, because you're only really trying to disrupt one or two of their champions. Like, okay, he won't be provoking, if they've built like a Duchess or a Siphi or someone with high resistance, as you're building some of your support champions, he won't be provoking them. But if you were going up against the mirror, he'd be provoking the Candraphon for certain.
Yeah, definitely.
And not everyone brings a cleanser in every team. Particularly, I think if they look at that kind of team, your team, they're not going to naturally bring a cleanser against that team.
No. True. Yeah, it's interesting.
So it's just about ways of layering up kind of annoyances.
Yeah.
And I think I'd also picked Krisk ahead of Goffred because I was thinking of Brogni at the time, which would have the nice synergy of the two passives.
Gotcha. So, true.
It's not something that you have to have the Krisk. Obviously, if you end up pulling a Necrit, just slot in nicely there.
That would be nice. I know, right? All right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. That totally makes sense. I'll definitely try it out because I am curious to see how it will perform. And I think the thing that I liked about this team as well, and I was thinking, was that even though my Krisk, there's a really good chance he's just going to die and potentially even die a lot. Well, we do have two revivers, and like Elva brings him back with increased defense. Uko brings him back with block damage. So, even if he does go down, it's not like we're lacking in revives to pick him back up. And whenever Krisk is dying, it's probably Candraphon is not dying. And then Candraphon, no matter what, he's always a threat. His A1 is so strong. His AoE is so strong. There's always that win condition looming that can just come in and wipe you out, on top of Uko doing all of that super, super annoying Uko stuff that Uko does. So I like it a lot. And then we've got, speaking of super annoying, we've got the meme team of dreams down here with Double Morty McCabe and Ultimate Death Knight. Talk us through this one.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, again, I'd say partly it was down to a lack of supports. So I was once again like, well, we're kind of, the supports are looking a little bit ropey, should we say, defensively anyway. Like, I don't think Rector, Yoshi, I don't think they're strong enough necessarily to be used on defense. I think they're a bit too one-dimensional. So I was a little bit hesitant to do that. And I was like, well, okay, if we don't have a natural support, a natural reviver, we need to make this team as annoying as possible and make sure that it really genuinely has win conditions. So Mortu satisfies that criteria so well, and having two of them can be, you could argue that ideally it would be better with one Mortu and another annoying champion, but I couldn't see one that was an obvious choice. So I thought running both of them and then having that combination of Mithrala and Ultimate Death Knight, which I know myself, when I've come up against the two of them together, they can be really annoying because you've got those continuous heals coming from Ultimate Death Knight, plus the shield and strengthen from Mithrala with the cleanse, and then you get that occasional decrease attack will come out from Ultimate Death Knight as well. And if you are running your Nuka and it gets the decrease attack on, it's the same issue I come up against Uko. Like, it's so easy for me to end up with a decrease attack on one of my Nukas if if there's a gap in my block debuffs in the cycling. and it just, you can't kill that team straight up. If you bring single target nukers to take down the Mortus, well, they're going to be hitting into Ultimate Death Knight. And if you bring AoE, there's enough damage mitigation from the strength and the shield, etc. And the fact that Mortus are tanking themselves and ideally probably would be built in Stone Skin, the whole team becomes a menace.
Yes, definitely. It's a really annoying team. So actually, I can tell you, I have every single one of those champs in Stone Skin. I've got Mithrala in just a 4-piece of Stone Skin. Ultimate Death Knight is actually doing a little bit of re-gearing right now. I have him in 6-piece of Stone Skin. I did have him with really high speed before for Hydra. So I was using him in Hydra. So he's in that sort of middle ground again at the moment where he had enough resistance for Hydra, but it's actually quite low for Arena. Like you're going up against someone with, let's say, 600 accuracy. I mean, 470 resistance might as well be 0. And I gave him like some crit rate and stuff. So he's actually, I do use him a lot and he's still really good. Well, I actually switched him out of speed boots into some defense boots, I think, there recently. They're waiting for CVC to be rolled up as well. They've had crit rate on them, which is a little unfortunate. But yeah, anyway, so he's in there. I might re-gear him at some point to drop even more speed and to just crank the resistance up higher and the defensive stats drop the crit rate. But it's still pretty good. And then I do have double Mortus, both in 6 pieces of Stone Skin. One of them has got good Stone Skin and the other has pretty bad Stone Skin. But yeah, this guy, he's coming in the 99% crit rate, of course. But he hits pretty hard. But yeah, I like them. They're quite a nightmare. So yeah, it's interesting. It's really annoying.
I think those builds look pretty good, actually, to be honest. Like you've obviously been getting quite a lot of Stone Skin, getting quite lucky on your drops. I personally haven't been so lucky. Yeah. But I think that's partly because my clan doesn't actually down Nightmare. I can one key it, but the clan doesn't beat it, so I only get a single chest rather than double.
Yeah, that's all right.
Which definitely is a disadvantage over a long period of time in terms of the amount of Stone Skin I'll get, which is why I've been quite hesitant to rebuild too many champions in Stone Skin, because my gear quality just isn't quite there.
I will say I am stretched a bit thin on the Stone Skin because I do run so many champions in it. But like it is also very helpful, and it just more comes in every week, so that does help. I actually have really bad protection gear. Someone was saying they built their Elva in protection, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder how I could build my Elva in protection. And I put her in the best protection gear in my account in the fitting room, and I was like, wow, this build sucks. It's so bad. So my protection luck has been really poor.
Certain, but I think that reiterates something that people, it's another trap that people fall into, and that's trying to build champions in the perfect set rather than prioritizing the best build they can do.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, like I was saying, Stone Skin is the go-to set in Arena now. Like most champions, optimum build will be Stone Skin, but I still have a lot of my champions built in other sets, Swift Parry, Untouchable, etc. And the reality is, it's better for me to have my Wither, and even actually my Mithrala is still in Untouchable as well. It's better for me to have them built really well in Untouchable than just kind of pretty good in Stone Skin.
That's true.
It's like finding that balancing out where that Stone Skin gets good enough that taking a small stat penalty actually means that the build overall is still better. Because Stone Skin, it only lasts 1 or 2 turns, and then it's actually giving you nothing. It's really just down to the raw stats after that. So if you don't have teams that are going to win in 1 or 2 turns reliably, then your Stone Skin becomes worth nothing by turn 3, 4, 5.
Very true.
And some of these fights, they get quite hairy and they can go on quite a long time, particularly if you've got double revive teams and you're struggling with your nuka to kill them both.
Yeah. Definitely. I will say with Double Mortu, I have tried it before. I think that on defense, this could be really strong. I will say on offense, I'd highly recommend not using it just to save your own sanity. Now, if you could put Uko in the team, then maybe, yeah. But because we don't have a reviver, especially, it can be extremely frustrating because it can be frustrating with one Mortu when the dude is getting punched left, right, and center. He's been hit about 50 times. It comes to his turn, and he's like, I'm just going to do my A1. No secret skill here. And you're like, come on, Mortu. It is absolutely soul-destroying when you got two of them, and the enemy team is just blasting into you, and they're sitting there in their stone skin, and then it comes to their turn, and both of them don't have peril unlocked, and you're like, what is going on, guys? You're killing me here. That can be really depressing. So that's one reason you might not want to, but it's happened.
But it's that funny thing, isn't it, right? On offense, you're trying to reduce the RNG that you experience. You're looking to minimize the RNG in the fight and control it. Whereas on defense, you're trying to increase all the RNG you possibly can to make it as annoying for the person attacking you. So like having double mortal on defense is amazing, but you're right.
Yeah.
Like it's not something I'd necessarily run on offense, because it could be amazing one fight and then soul destroying, as you said, on the next fight where you just don't proc it.
Definitely. But I mean, like, I see Mortus on defense. Like right here, I'm going like, oh my god, Ultimate Death Knight, Mortu, Uko, like that. I think I can beat that team probably. We can test it out, but that's annoying. I'm already annoyed seeing that team. It's like, I don't want to fight that, you know? Mortu is just one of those champs on defense that sucks. I will say I did try to figure out a way to incorporate Mortus into two different teams. I found it was quite difficult because of what we mentioned already, of the lack of support champions to protect them. Because with Mortu, you like to have that long fight with a really difficult to kill team, so lots of chances to proc peril. I found it was tough to find like a really good team that for two of them. But I do love using my one Mortu. I use him a lot. Shall I show you the teams that I actually do run on defense, and we can comment definitely on those? I think the grand reveal for what I use, because I think they're similar concepts, but some slight differences. So this is team number one that I do use. We have the Ultimate Death Knight Mithrala combo, but I actually brought in Brogni and Candrafon into this team. So it's a bit of a combination of two halves of two of the teams that you were mentioning, actually. In your teams.
Completely. I mean, we had before Elva, Brogni was in that bit, so we had the Brogni Candy plus the Mithrala Ultimate Death Knight.
So it's sort of mixing those two in. So yeah, it's interesting. In terms of this team for me, I actually find this team to be very, very effective. So we lack a reviver. Clearly with this team, Duchess in place of Brogni brings you basically everything that Brogni does, but more. Brogni is not bringing too much outside of that, really. So Duchess would be like, bring this to another level. She brings the perfect veil for more damage reduction here. The revive, of course. The veil enables Candrafon, and that passive from Duchess is just so strong. Whereas Brogni brings a shield, but it actually clashes with both the Ultimate Death Knight and Mithrala shield, so there's an anti-synergy there. But it still works reasonably well. Like, basically, Mithrala comes in, she cleanses them, then Brogni gets up the block debuffs to increase attack, gives Candrafon a chance to go ham. It's quite difficult to kill, at least the Candrafon, these ones. Brogni tends to die, but these ones are quite difficult to kill. They can take a good few hits, and it's just sort of biding time for Candrafon to hopefully kill them. So this team tends to work decently well on defense. One interesting thing, which I've got mixed feelings on, is again, Brogni, if I can find him somewhere. Where's Blue?
Just a little bit up
there he is.
Right. So, one thing about Brogni that's actually often underappreciated, I would say, is just how annoying his semi-strip can be.
Yeah.
When you are going up against it, like it can be quite annoying. Like I've had it where I've been fighting him, and that strip just, even they don't tend to have great accuracy, so it's not going to be stripping anything from my Duchess or my Wither or my Mithrala or whatever. But it often ends up taking off the increased attack off the nuke. And it's like, oh.
Yeah. So my Brogni's doing a little bit of a re-gear. I had him in double reaction for a long time, and then I was like, it's really annoying then when sometimes he just dies on turn one, even with the bolster. So I've re-geared him slightly with more health and a third reaction. He's in a sort of weird wishy-washy place, though, where it's resistance. So he's got like some resistance, but not much. He's got a tiny bit of accuracy, but not much. And in fact, can't be built with accuracy because it would mess up some Doom Tower teams. And then he's got a little bit of speed, but I actually ended up dropping speed. So he's not speed tuned with Mithrala like he was before, which is kind of nice to get the block debuffs up. But Yeah, so he's sort of in a weird middle ground with the build, but it works pretty well. So I've been fairly happy with the team. Like I said, the big weakness is definitely I'm going the wrong place. The lack of revive, definitely. But apart from that, I found it to be a good team, both on defense and on offense. So that was team 1. Interesting combo. This is team 2, where we got a couple of champions that we haven't mentioned, actually. This one being the weird one that you probably didn't expect. We did mention Staltus. I actually am a huge Staltus fan now. He's like my favorite champ at the moment. I feel like Staltus is just a monster. So what we have going on here is you got the double threat. We've got Staltus, who brings in 2 nukes, provides his own increased defense as well. So he's a big AoE damage threat. And I felt like that combos quite well with Mortu, actually, who brings that single target damage threat. So if they got like a Duchess team or a really defensive team that Staltus can't kill, because we don't have like decreased defense or anything with this, Mortu still provides a threat to take him out. We've got the Uko to strip their buffs and to bring us like revives and stuff. This is where Hakorn's a little bit awkward. He brings us the block debuffs and cleanse in case their stone skin stuff does get stripped. Because some of these champions can still take a hit. It'd be better if they had more reaction. I actually have them in bolster, which I think is actually not super successful, but it's kind of weird. I kind of figured, so this is the problem I had with Hakorn, is that he comes in, right? He's got a massive heal with block debuffs, but because the other champs are in stone skin, half the time they haven't taken any damage, so the massive heal isn't that good. So I kind of figured, hey, he's got no reaction. I have him in bolster. If he dies and Uko revives him, it's actually not the worst thing. He can come in and then maybe heal us back up and stuff. So that's been an experimentation. He is going to be replaced in a couple of days by Elva in that team, who I think is just much better. She brings the block debuffs. It's what you put together here in this team here, the Uko and the Elva. And then we're basically bringing in Mortu, the 2 Mortus. We're swapping through the damage threat in a way. But yeah, I think Elva's just going to give that extra revive. Elva's got consistent healing, which synergizes better with the stone skin stuff. So yeah, I think that Elva is a better fit for the team than Hakorn. He's a real B tier sort of thing, but I mean, he's got tons of HP, so I thought with bolster, it's not so bad. But this team has actually worked reasonably well too, kind of surprising in a sense. I'm excited to see how it does with Elva.
I think when you sent me the screenshots, I don't think Stoutus was built at the time.
Oh, that's possible.
Noted.
That
I have
possible.
Ragash in the list, but I don't have Stoutus.
It's very possible.
And I agree. Like Stoutus is pretty damn strong. Like I've come across a couple in Stone Skin that hit really hard, and it can be a bit of a nuisance to deal with. So definitely a very viable option. And then, like you said, Hakorn ultimately gets replaced by Elva, and in fact, like, that team is 2 of the main components in the other team that I suggested. So it's kind of like you have all the same ingredients, just kind of sprinkled a little bit differently.
I know.
So my rationale with Ultimate Death Knight with Mortu. So this is my thinking. Candy does veil himself.
Yeah.
So they're probably not bringing in a single target nuker against Candy. They're probably bringing in AoE.
Yeah.
Whereas at Mortu, people are probably trying to single target nuke the other champions and avoid hitting Mortu. So they're probably going to want to avoid an AoE nuker against a Mortu team. Enter Ultimate Death Knight. So that was my logic on the synergy and which one to go with. And then I thought, well, with Ultimate Death Knight, we have some healing. Mithrala brings us a little bit of different sustain. And then the other team, now has Elva for a little bit of healing, plus Uko for a bit of support. And previously, we were going to rely on Brogni shield passive combo to give us a little bit of top-up healing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like trying to balance out those elements to give us some way of having sustain for longer fights. But, whether you have the Mortu or the Candy in which team they're in, I don't think it really matters. There'll be a nuisance either way, but I do think that Ultimate Death Knight should be with Mortu for that reason about the AoE versus single target.
What do you think about this one, which is basically bringing in a Candrafon, or you could bring in Staltus as well, alongside the Mortu with the Ultimate Deach Knight. So you're sort of ditching the Brogni that I had in there, to bring in a Mortu, to bring in that threat of the peril.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's literally our third team,
Very
but just
similar.
with Candy instead of
Yeah,
the
slight
second
change.
Mortu. Then
Yeah.
it's the exact same thing. And then in
Yeah.
team 2, you're bringing in Stoutus instead of Candy. Like, that's completely
Yeah.
viable. It's just about distributing those champions, and with Stoutus, arguably you could say that's probably actually better than what I'd originally proposed, because in team 2, the one thing we're lacking with the Uko plus Elva is we don't have an initial increase attack for Candy, whereas
That's right, yeah.
at least Stoutus can buff himself more easily. I mean, Candy can, and I would leave the A3 on.
Yeah,
in
I
that
do.
team in
Yeah,
defense.
you have to. Yeah.
So it's kind of like it almost doesn't matter, and I guess at that point you just look at it and decide what you prefer and kind of what works better for your builds.
You can see my team 3 here as well, which is, spoiler warning, the least effective defense of the bunch.
I was going to say, it's just too easy to counter.
It is,
That's the problem. It's very easy to counter that team.
It is.
Mithrala basically counters that team.
She does, yeah. That's true.
And that's the problem. Like, everyone has Mithrala, and
they do.
She perfectly counters your third team.
I know. The third team is really not good. So that's one to definitely go and to switch up. So that's where I'm gonna go in and rebuild some of these. So there you go. I thought it was interesting to see that these are the defenses I'm actually using. We'll switch in more too, and then I'll figure out how to tweak this one. But yeah, like the concept of this team would have been good a while ago, where the threat of the Hegemon and the Kymar would have actually been quite good. But as you said, now you've got Stone Skin, now you've got like Mithrala that just can't be debuffed or stripped. So this team is really floundered. So yeah, it was like threw it together and it's not been very good. It loses most of them. So that's definitely one to change. Shall we do some offense battles then as well? So we had some offense teams here too. Here we go. Do you want to split the video there, maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say, should we end on the defense?
Let's do that.
And then go on to offense and talk about that.
Do some fights, yeah. All right,
and do the fights, because I think it's probably been fairly lengthy.
It's about an hour long, yeah.
Just for this first half of it.
This first half, yeah. All right, let's split it. Let's do it. Okay. Great. So there we go, guys. We're gonna cut here, and then for going into actually, hang on. Let me hide this. This is secret, top secret. Okay, hang on. All right. So here we go, guys. We're gonna cut it right here. The offense page, I've got it, but a little preview there. If you've got binoculars, maybe you can see it, or YouTube compression has probably foiled you there. But we're going to jump over onto Eherbad's channel, where if this video was too short and you want to hear more of us talking, we're going to go in. We're going to fight some fights in the arena, see this stuff in action. If you've been curious about these defenses, I'm sure we're going to be attacking some, if not all of them, and seeing what works for them, what works for us in offense, etc., etc. But that's going to be over on Eherbad's channel. Speaking of Eherbad, thank you for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this part 1 in our Lord of the Rings extended edition length collab today.
The marathon trilogy. But thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure as always.
All right, great guys. We'll see you over on Eherbad's channel for the next part. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.